Everyone wants to live an inspired life, yet so many people search for happiness following the footsteps of peers and taking advice from people who have different values and outcomes to which they're searching. There are people born into wealth, graduated from the best universities in the world, and there are people who have none of that and yet are living extraordinary lives full of fulfillment and reward. The purpose of this podcast is to share insights and strategies that allow you to question the status quo and think freely, so you can design your life and be who you want to be. We get one life. Time is our most valuable asset. I believe that when we're free and able to focus on meaningful work, we become better human beings. This is Always Free, and I'm your host, Jason Graystone.
Welcome to the leading podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with Jason on social media and subscribe to the Jason Graystone YouTube channel for weekly videos. Don't forget to also subscribe to the weekly newsletter to receive frequent educational content and action steps to help you design your life so you can be who you want to be. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.
Well, welcome back to the podcast, guys. I hope you had a great week so far. I've been hammering my book this week, so I haven't been very active on social, but we've been getting the book done, so it'll be out later this year. If you're listening to this for the first time, welcome. You're in the best place for financial empowerment and wealth creation, because this is the #1 podcast for just that. If you have only just started to listen, go back and listen to episode 1. You'll get a lot of value from going through the journey of this podcast series in order. So can't stress that enough. And this week it's going to be a little bit different, actually, because although I'm not going completely off topic, it's all about wealth creation. But I've been asked quite a bit lately about giving some advice on how to launch a podcast. And this podcast has been, it's been received and it's provided value to many people who listen to it. And frequently I get asked, look, I love the podcast. I just love how it resonates. You can switch off. You can, there's something about the podcast medium that resonates with people at a deep level. Okay, and I've said it time and time again, you connect with people in a way that you can't connect with on video, on social media, on blogs or articles or YouTube, because there's no visuals. So when it's just my voice that you're hearing, you're basically hearing that with no dictation of visuals. So you can't be guided by my visuals, which means all you can do is relate what I'm saying to your own personal experiences and really, get a deep feeling of where the information in this podcast is applicable to you and where you can relate to it in your life. And you're able to get into some intimate locations with people. As I've said before, it's like you can be listening to me on the beach or on holiday or in the pool or in the gym, or maybe you're in bed or whatever it is, walking, when you've got that headspace to really switch off and listen and work on you. And when you can hear someone and resonate with a message from someone when you're in that space, it's a very deep connection. And as a result, I've been able to, at the current time of this recording, we're getting about 5,500 listens or downloads per week. So that's 5,500 people listening to this particular podcast each and every week when it comes out. And that's amazing, right? Because not only is that, a lot of people are kind of getting carried away with likes and things like that on their social media. And the thing with likes is they're a bit pointless, okay? They're not, you can't really measure likes in terms of how your business is growing, because anyone will just like something. However, when you look at a podcast and you take the time to look at how many people have left reviews and gone out of their way to leave a thank you or a review on your podcast, that is measurable, and that is a key metric in growing income and growing business. If you're converting people from a podcast as your free offering into a business funnel. And I've had over 250 5-star reviews on this podcast. Now, just to shed some insights on that, if you had 2,500 people listen per week and you had 250 thank you or reviews left over from 250 people, that's 10% of those listeners have actually are really warm listeners. Okay. Now, let's just say that those 250 people buy your program and you've got a program for £1,000 or £2,000. That's anything between, 250 and £500,000, £250,000 and £500,000 in revenue just from connecting with someone, giving them free value. Okay. And then giving them your program for the fair price. So it is a very great thing to do, and I recommend that everyone shares their message via the podcast platform. And I'm going to run through with you everything that I've done and all the things that I recommend if you're looking to launch a podcast. Okay, so I recommend that you get a pen and paper ready for this. It's a different episode to normal. This is purely due to popular demand. And at the end of the podcast, I'm going to share with you a little link that you can go to in order to go and watch a full-blown hour-long presentation that I did on exactly what we did when we launched this very podcast, so that you can bypass all the mistakes and get cracking straight away and have the best chance of succeeding. So get a pen and paper and I'll start reeling off. So the first reason that I recommend that everyone does a podcast is not only because it resonates with everyone and you can really connect with your message, but it's very cheap. Okay, if you're doing it for your business, it's a great product for potential prospects. Okay, people that just want to fill you out a little bit, but don't want to commit any money, or they don't want you to even know that they're committing at that point. All right. The second reason is it's growing massively. It is a massive trend, right? So back in 2007, okay, when we really 2006, 2007, when we started to see this kind of trend kick off, there was only about under 1,000 podcasts launch on iTunes in 2007. Well, fast forward that, and we're up to almost 10,000 per month launched on iTunes. Okay, so there's been a steady rise of podcasts and people creating podcasts because they get that it's popular, right? They get that it's a powerful medium. And according to Apple, okay, there's an estimated 550,000 podcasts out there at the time of this recording. But that is literally a drop in the ocean compared to the 150 million blogs and 50 million vlogs that are out there at the moment. Okay, so 500,000 compared to 150 million, you're very, very small still, even though you think, 10,000 people a month are creating a podcast. So don't let that put you off. It's growing and we're still very, very niche, very, very minority. Okay, and although thousands of podcasts are launched every month, 93% of podcasters, get this, quit after 7 episodes, right? So, and the reason is that it's lack of traction. They're not playing the long game. They've got short time horizons in their mind. It's too complicated. It's not fun. Okay, and that means that only 7% of podcasts are going past episode 7. Isn't that incredible? And I always say, like, at every given time, I've got this 90-10 rule. Everything that you don't want to do, there's 90% of the people in that exact situation will give up at that point. You just have to keep going. And I'm going to share with you a way that it won't be, not fun or lose traction and all that kind of stuff. So also, 80% of listeners listen to most of each podcast, so the retention rate's great. They listen to almost the end of the podcast, whereas the video, they switch off. So that means that podcast listeners are very, very loyal. Weekly podcast listeners average 7 per week. So they're mad for podcasts. 23% of the people in the UK have listened to a podcast in the last month. 23%. 70% of podcast listeners have heard advertisements, and 3/4 of them have taken action as a result, right? So the ones that hear, 70% of the ones that hear your call to actions in your podcast, take action. How incredible is that, right? And then also 64% of the listeners have said that they've bought a product after listening. So if they've gone and taken action as a result of your podcast or gone to an advert or something, whatever you've done, 64% of those have gone and bought a product after doing that. All right. So look, as we've just gone through a major pandemic, okay, the e-learning and that whole online learning space or development space is growing, okay, and market research from global industry analysts projected e-learning would reach 107 billion in 2015, and it did. Okay, and now research and market forecasts show triple the revenue of 2015. E-learning will grow by 325 billion by 2025. Now, I'm not saying that that's obviously all going to be in a podcast, but it's relative, right? If more people are pushing online, that's another 2/3 increase from what it was in 2015, which we can see a share of that going towards development through podcasts. So again, another reason that I highly recommend you get into podcasting. We've just seen Joe Rogan sign an exclusive check of $100 million, okay, to Spotify for his Joe Rogan Experience podcast. I believe that in the next 5 years, we're going to see a $1 billion check signed to a content creator. This is where it's going. Also, if you want to collab with people, say you've got like a hero or some celebrity or one of your kind of influencers, they're much more likely to collab with you on your podcast than they would to meet them in person and do a video with them. Podcasts, people are mad for. It's very easy to set up. They don't have to leave their house if you're recording over a Zoom call or something like that. And people just want to do it. They can control the media, right? So you're not going to snip it and edit it to make it look dodgy. They can, it's just them answering questions raw. So they like to do those kind of collaborations, and the chances are anyone you ask to be on your podcast would usually say yes, more likely to say yes than if you was getting on a video or writing an article or anything like that. All right, so that's another reason. All right, so I want to go for a quick plan, okay, and I want you to write this down. So look at it as planning, recording, editing, launching, and distributing. All right, and I'm going to go through with you some questions now that you can answer. So get a pen and paper handy, and we'll smash through these right now. So the first one is, why are you starting a podcast? Okay, so what's the concept? What's it going to be about? What makes it different? Who are you talking to? Okay, will it be hosted by you, and will you have a co-host? Okay, so really just build an avatar of someone that you're speaking to and what it's going to be about, how it's going to help them, how it's going to be different from all the other podcasts out there, and whether you're going to host it on your own or you're going to host it with someone. The next one is really get deep with the listener. Okay, so what are they interested in? What do they want? What's the result that they want? What are the challenges that they face? What are the problems and pains that they're facing right now? What are their fantasies? What are their dreams? What are their goals? What are their ambitions? What are they going after in life? And where do they want to be? Okay, so where do they want to be, which makes them want to listen to your podcast? Also, where do they spend their time on social? Are they on LinkedIn, Twitter? Are they on Facebook? Are they on Instagram? What consumes their day on a day-to-day basis? And when will they listen to your podcast? So, for instance, we select a time of Thursday for this podcast because we know people are feeling a little bit good because the weekend's coming, and that's the message we really want to tap into. Freedom, breaking out. We want to capture them in that mindset. Will they be listening to your podcast on the commute? These all play a part in when you're going to launch your weekly podcast or monthly podcast. We're going to go through that in a minute, but it will dictate when the optimum time is to deliver the release of your podcast. So get to grips with when they're going to listen. Are they in the gym? When do they go to the gym? Is it lunchtime? Is it after work? When is that? And then again, what problem is your podcast solving for them? Once you've written the answers to those questions, you want to think about the podcast style. So what type of show is it? Is it a storytelling show? Is it a documentary? Is it educational? Is it interviews? Is it motivational? Is it entertainment? Or is it a bit of a mix? And then what is the podcast name going to be? And when it comes to podcast names, try and choose a positive name or a contrarian statement or a provocative name. Okay, so like always free, those are two very, very positive words, but it's also a bit, what does that mean? What does that, it's kind of, people are inquisitive to what it means. Another example could be, the Power Couple podcast or School Doesn't Matter. right? So these kind of things that get people, oh, that sounds interesting. You know, what do they mean by that? I want to listen a bit more on that. And then once you've got a title, think about when you're going to schedule the podcast. So is it going to be daily, weekly, bi-monthly, monthly, quarterly? Is it going to be season-based or is it going to be random? I would advise against random because people build subconscious levels of trust when they are consistent, when they know what they're going to get. Okay, so they want you to show up and in the back of their mind, it's just like, I thought so. I thought they'd show up now. And those little subconscious trust building will play a massive part in your audience. Okay, so figure out if it's daily, weekly, bi-monthly, monthly. The most important thing is it's consistent and you don't keep missing them. So make sure that you pick a time that suits your lifestyle. The next thing is the running time. Okay, so things to bear in mind are where they're listening. So if they're going to the gym, how long's the podcast going to be? You know, half hour, 20 minutes? What's their attention span? How long's their commute to work if you're going for work? You know, what's their lifestyle like? Is it hectic? Do they, have they got a structured routine where you can tap into a certain part of their day? How long is that? So how long's the running time of your podcast? So keep in mind that the average commute is 25.4 minutes. Okay. But 50% of people listen to podcasts at home, 18% in a car. All right. And the reason that we picked this podcast is usually between 18 and 33 minutes. And that's a mix between the average attention span in the adult and the average commute. So we picked kind of a bit of both and we launch it on either on a Thursday evening or a Friday morning. So it's at the same time and it's either a commute home or a commute to work. That said, Rob Walsh, the Vice President of the podcaster relations at Libsyn, which is the largest host and distribution platform, has said that among their 84% of podcasts with more than 100,000 downloads per episode are longer than 51 minutes. So bear in mind, most people listen to the end. People are listening to podcasts regardless, right? 51 minutes. So that's really cool. So don't let the time stop you. This particular episode is going to be longer than my normal one because I'm doing something a little bit different here. But don't be afraid to do longer podcasts. All right, then there's the content. So people get overwhelmed with planning content, and really it just boils down to this. Okay, you just want to talk about some points. I don't script out anything when I do these podcasts, but what I will do is I'll just have a kind of theme or a topic, and all I'll do is bullet point some notes that I want to hit during that topic, talking about that topic. And I usually start with kind of the problem or the misconception, then I'll talk about some insights, and then I'll give you some action steps, and then I'll leave you with a really nice big finish to uplift you and make you feel good about listening to the episode and want to share it, right? Now, there's websites that you can use like answerthepublic.com where you can type in your area of expertise or knowledge and it will throw up a ton of questions that people are already asking on Google. So you can just go and answer those. You can populate a spreadsheet with a ton of those questions, give your content piece a title on each one, and then just bullet point some notes next to each one of what you want to cover during that podcast. And you'll find that you'll easily smash a 10, 20-minute podcast easy. All right, the next thing is the gear. So people worry about the gear. Before I talk about the gear, you want to figure out if you're going to be doing it solo or you're going to co-host or you're going to have guests or you're face-to-face. And some of the equipment will differ depending on what you're going to do. But lots of you ask about recorders, right? And I'm going to recommend one called the Zoom H6 recorder. It is absolutely phenomenal and it's a great piece of kit, very good quality sound if you're going to record you or you're going to record yourself and guests over a table. That will work perfectly well. You can also plug in SLR mics into that, like a studio mic or a lav mic or something like that. You can plug that in and it will connect wirelessly or wired to that device. So really, really powerful. And there's loads of other recorders you can get, but honestly, guys, I've used a Rode Podcaster microphone. I've used a Blue Yeti microphone. I've used all this stuff. I've got a Zoom H6 recorder. Do you know what I use? And I'm using right now my iPhone. So I gave up using all of that technology when I realized people don't really care. It's the message, it's the resonating with the message, it's the value in the content. It's not about the bass and the treble and the depth and the warmth to my voice. It's none of that. So if you've got a smartphone, that's going to cost you nothing because you've already got it. And I just use the voice notes on my iPhone, and I'm using that right now. So if you think the sound of this podcast is okay, I'm using voice notes on my iPhone. I just click done, send it over to my Mac. We stick it into some editing software, and it's good to go. So if you do have guests and you want to use a webcam and you're doing them remotely, I would consider using a Logitech webcam. Okay. Now, ideally, you can link up a DSLR camera to your computer. But if you just want a webcam, the Logitech Brio 4K is absolutely amazing. Or the one below that is still really, really good, which is the Logitech C922, which is a 1080p HD display. That's about 80 quid. The Logitech Brio is about 250, but believe me, it is absolutely amazing if you want to have that. But then again, if you're recording web guests, then if their webcam isn't as great, then you're going to look great, and it's going to make the contrast terrible if theirs is pretty poor. So bear that in mind. And then in terms of editing software, you can use Audacity, where you essentially just drop the MP3 file or the WAV file into a timeline, cut out all the ums and ers. Okay, this is pretty raw. This is all raw, so we don't edit mine anymore. I just talk, and it goes uploaded straight away. We add the intro and outro, and it's job done. But Audacity is where you're going to add the intro and outro. So you'll upload your file from your phone or from the H6 recorder or whatever recorder you're using, put the memory card in, put it on your laptop or your PC, and you'll put the WAV file into Audacity. You'll add a little jingle at the start or your intro, and then that's it. Job done. You just render that whole file into one MP3 that becomes your podcast episode. I use Final Cut Pro. We use Final Cut Pro. You don't need Final Cut Pro. That is an advanced video software, but we just use it because we do all of our video editing in it, and I just use it as a double up, really. But you don't need that. But if you've got it, you can use that. You can just go to Window, Voice Recorder, click Record, and you can record straight into Final Cut. Okay, and if you do need a jingle done, just go on to Upwork or Fiverr, type in jingle or intro, and you'll get plenty of people that have great voiceover and professional voiceover recording artists that will do a little jingle for you. Write them a 30-second script, send it to them. They'll charge about probably £25-30 for that to be done, and then it's done. You only have to do that once. Okay, that gets on to hosting. Okay, so Libsyn is what I use, Libsyn. It's probably one of the most popular platforms for content, podcast content delivery at the time of this recording. It's very, very cheap. It's something like $5 to $7 per month. Very, very cheap. And it's very easy to use. Nice platform. You upload it, add a description, add a title. It streams out to all of the different platforms, iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, all of those different platforms it will launch out to, even SoundCloud it will link to, and it will display your podcast on all of those via an RSS feed. So you don't have to go and post it everywhere. You just put it into Libsyn and it is done. Other platforms like Anchor, which I think Gary V promotes, you just record and it uploads straight away from your phone. Very simple, but not as much flexibility with that particular app, in my opinion. And then there's SoundCloud, which is pretty similar to Libsyn. You go on, you upload, and it's job done. The thing I like about Libsyn is you get a lot of great stats in the back end, and I'm obsessed with stats and trends and tracking. So as I say, I wouldn't have known that for every person that had downloaded my podcast every week, converted to a different amount of people leaving reviews, which converted to a different amount of people buying a conversion rate of people buying a program from me. So I love stats and I love to be able to see that. Libsyn's a great place for that. Also in Libsyn, you can schedule them, so you can record 10 episodes and then get them scheduled to go out week on week on week. And I recommend you do that if you can, because it takes the pressure off of trying to come up with something every week if you're not planned for it. All right, now let's go into iTunes, because before you launch a podcast on iTunes, there's going to be some requirements and you don't want to come unstuck. If you're going to do a launch on your podcast, you want to have a podcast Connect account set up, okay? And there's some rules as well. So go to Podcast Connect or iTunes Connect and you want to open a iTunes Connect account. And before you submit your podcast to iTunes, make sure that you meet the following requirements, okay? So your artwork, your little logo, which you can have done again on Fiverr or Canva, canva.com, canva.com. You can create a little square 1080 by 1080 podcast logo for that, icon for that. So your artwork, when you upload it to iTunes, has to be at least 1400 by 1400 pixels and at most 3000 by 3000 pixels in size, and I recommend that it's 1400 by 1400, okay? You also have to check a unique podcast program title, okay? So go onto iTunes and make sure that your program title is unique to you and it doesn't exist. You also have to at least select one iTunes category. Okay, so you're going to select a category and then they're going to put you into another subcategory as well. So for instance, business and entrepreneurship, or business and investing, or healthcare and then children. So it can be, depending on what they choose for you, you just get to select the main category and then they'll select a couple of subcategories for you as well. You have to have a valid email address in the iTunes email. Okay, so you'll have to have an Apple account because it gets sent from that email address. And you have to have created at least one episode of your podcast in MP3, M4A, MP4, or Wave. Okay, so what I recommend is you record at least the first 3. Okay, and then put the first 3 into the platform in one hit. And then if you've completed all that, you're ready to submit your podcast to iTunes and other podcast directories. Okay, so how do you get your podcast streaming from Libsyn to iTunes? You go into Libsyn, you'll see that your Libsyn feed there, it has got /RSS. Okay, so if you go to https /jasongraystone.libsyn.com /RSS. That will take you to a stream that will show you my podcast. And all iTunes wants is that stream. It's like transmitting your podcast updates via the interweb, and iTunes is listening for that constantly, and it will update itself depending on what Libsyn is telling it. So you go into the iTunes Connect account, and again, that can take up to 24 hours to 10 days. So don't come unstuck. Don't say you're going to launch a podcast and then, I'm going to do it on this date, and then iTunes haven't even approved your account. Make sure you give yourself enough time. And then you just paste that RSS feed into the URL page on the iTunes Connect page. And the iTunes Connect page is so simple. It's blank. It's just a white page with a URL box that you put that. You can't mess it up. All right, and then you launch, okay? So you might want to do a bit of hyping up before you launch. Make sure you get it hyped up on the social media, and then you launch. And the most important thing I can say about launching a podcast is make sure that you ask people to subscribe to the podcast, to rate the podcast, and leave a review on the podcast. Because what that will do is that will get you into a little category called New and Noteworthy on iTunes. And once you're in that New and Noteworthy section on iTunes, you're in there for about 6 to 8 weeks. So the aim is to get into there. If you've been picked up by the algorithm and you're seen as new and noteworthy, that's a great place to be, because you're going to get seen, you're going to get eyes on your podcast constantly. And then if you can keep shamelessly promoting the podcast and getting subs, rates, reviews, eventually you're going to get up the charts, and you want to keep an eye on 1, the first initial category that you selected, and 2, the secondary category that Apple put you in as well, and just keep checking the updates of where you are. Share that online. Say, look, I'm at number 20. Help me get to 15. Help me get to 10. Help me get to number 1. And eventually you'll move up, and hopefully you'll hit the top of the charts like we did with this very podcast. Things that you can do to incentivize that is, if you've got a business, do a competition, do a giveaway, book, merchandise, a free consultancy session, discount, do a little competition and really just get the momentum going, get the hype going, get people engaged with your podcast, get them listening, and eventually that algorithm will trigger. Also, if you've featured anyone on your first few episodes, and some people recommend getting the 3 biggest speakers, if they're doing guests, getting the 3 big hitters on their first 3 episodes to build momentum, to kind of launch off the ground and hit the ground running. Get them to retweet them or reshare them or repost them on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, because they will, because it's promoting their message as well. So when you launch those podcasts, make sure you tag them and ask them to share. Send them a little pack to say, please, could you put this on your story? This is where we featured you. Do a swipe up and all the rest of it. Okay, so that's the most important thing. Some other tips that I've got for you are to, firstly, what I just said, launch the first 3 to 5 episodes in one go to build momentum. You can use buzzwords and current topics and talk about those that are relevant to you. I'm not saying go out and say coronavirus and then talk about something completely different, because that's more like clickbait. We don't want to be doing that. We want to be giving value. Give high value. Explain the concept of your podcast and what's to come. So in the first episode, or early on, explain your story or tell them about what it's about and what it's really all about, where it's going to get them to if they stay. And then finally, you might have already guessed this one, but ask people to go back to episode 1. That creates a really nice loop effect, okay? And it gets people engaged and keeps people listening to them all rather than just one and turning off. So every single episode you hear me say, go back to episode 1, listen from there, and I promise you'll get value. So that creates a really, really nice loop effect. And lastly, I just want to say, just do it. It's so easy. Don't overthink it. Just chip away, make a start. Don't think of it as this big elaborate goal. It really isn't. You just pick up your phone, you record, bullet point some ideas, speak to your phone, upload it to Libsyn, get all the accounts set up to build momentum. And I promise you, if you launch a podcast, you're going to be connecting with people in a way that is truly, truly inspiring to you. Every day I'm receiving reviews and thank yous for the value that people get from this podcast. And, I'm very, very grateful to wake up every day and be able to share value with people and receive those kind of messages. So that is it. Hopefully you got value from this, but if you do want to get access to a full workshop that I did on this, because I love sharing things that work. And what I did is a full workshop on how we launched this podcast to number 1, going through all the gear in detail, what I've just been over in a lot of detail. If you want access to that and you want to get your pen and paper and you want to go and watch that, lock yourself away for an hour, go to bit.ly/number1 podcast. Number 1 podcast, the word 1, not the number. And I'll put the link in the description of this. Go and check it out, guys. And next week we'll be back. Until then, have a great rest of your day and weekend, and I'll see you then.
For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.